kind of informally, we've got three great companies that I'm going to be presenting and talking with today. They've got a lot to share, and I'm really excited about who they are and what they're doing in that region and what they can share with us today. I'm going to start with the CFO of Fintech Financial Corp Canada, and that's Karim Hirji. Am I saying your name correct?
Hirji.
Intech's a special case in that it's not a startup, but rather a major financial institution. What were the considerations for setting up a presence in Asia, and why Hong Kong in particular?
Thanks. Yes, as you mentioned, Intech is a bit of a different situation. We're not a startup. We have 26,000 employees globally, over 20 billion in revenues. And I think in order to understand, why we chose Asia, understanding a bit of our background, I think is important. Our belief in terms of outperforming the property and casualty industry in Canada, over the last decade, in excess of 700 basis points, really has to do with leveraging our core competencies, one of which is around data and managing data. We believe that access to data and the ability to derive risk-related insights from it will help continually improve the customer experience and continue to drive value. And, based on that belief over the last 5 years, we have 200 data specialists here in Canada focused on machine learning and artificial intelligence. And they've been able to put in many models into production here in Canada. In Canada, we've been very fortunate. It's been at the heartbeat of AI research and development for the last generation, both here in Toronto and in Montreal. But as we look forward to the next generation, the next 20, 30, 40 years, it is probably safe to say that there are going to be developments in countries other than Canada. And in particular, when we started researching back in 2018, where we potentially should be investing some capital, China was high on the list. We're all familiar with the amount of resources, both from a capital perspective, talent perspective, that the Chinese government has put forth in terms of developing their AI expertise over the next generation and making that a core part of their strategy, as well as the Chinese consumer just being more digitally engaged, allowing for AI models to be launched into production at a pace really that's not seen anywhere else in the world. So, based upon that, when I decided, where to open up Intech's first international lab outside of Canada, being close to that was important, and we decided to open up in Hong Kong.
It sounds like the Hong Kong operation doesn't have the objective of identifying revenue as its first priority, but rather talent. What was it about the local that made it stand out in this regard for you?
Yeah, so I think, being close to the, mainland Chinese ecosystem was important. And quite honestly, when we first started looking, Beijing, Shanghai, some of the traditional centers were high on my list that I, spent a lot of time in. But again, we're not selling insurance in China or in Hong Kong. It's our customers' data, it's Canadian customers' data. So data protection and IP protection was very important on my list. And that's really when, I started thinking about Hong Kong as a potential alternative. One of my friends here took me to an event in Hong Kong, and we spent some time, and I got to meet the 4 out of the top 100 universities globally that operate in Hong Kong. I met with some of the companies that operate in Hong Kong around AI research and development. We visited Cyberport, Science Park, et cetera. And I thought I could actually get the best of both worlds, being in a city that has close proximity to some of the cutting edge research that may be happening in mainland China, but having some of the benefits of having data protection, IP protection in Hong Kong, and having access to the talent that is being developed by the universities and by the fintech and AI ecosystem in Hong Kong as well. So, fast forward, I moved there in 2019. 18 months later, I'm back in Canada, but we've been able to open up 2 offices in Hong Kong. We've got 25 AI experts and 3 squads that are up and running in Hong Kong as we speak.
Oh, that's great. Your perspective is rather unique. What can you say as to the state of the fintech ecosystem in Asia, COVID notwithstanding?
Yeah, so, in addition to, leading the finance function in Canada here, I also manage Fintech Ventures, which is a $400 million venture capital fund that invests in emerging technology businesses globally. So I got to know the ecosystem quite well in Hong Kong. And I would say, first of all, the ecosystem is very strong in Hong Kong. I think it's such a close-knit community. And I'd say, I've traveled the world and we have businesses globally. I've never felt the openness from a business community like I felt in Hong Kong. You know, we felt it obviously from InvestHK, as Chris mentioned. We felt it with the you know, the local Hong Kong representation here in Canada, but even from businesses in Hong Kong and in the community, people would pick up the phone. They'd be willing to help. They'd be willing to engage, and it made my transition to Hong Kong a lot easier. But you know, it's quite interesting when you take a look at Canada. You know, you have almost an oligopoly in terms of how the banking sector, the fintech sector works in Canada, but they do quite a good job in terms of actually meeting customer needs. I think in Hong Kong, they have the advantage of having a regulator that I think has been a little bit more open in terms of allowing new models to flourish and to form for people to, you know, play in sandboxes. But I also think that the banking system is just a little bit behind, I think, in terms of meeting customer needs as well in Hong Kong. So you find a wide array of companies there that are able to focus on incremental improvement, whether that's, you know, KYC or other measurements. But you also have the luxury of working within the sandbox of a regulatory system to allow more testing and innovation. So I think for the market that they operate in, there's a lot of opportunities for fintech in Hong Kong and in Asia in particular.
That's pretty exciting. In your opinion, how does the Asian talent pool and fintech ecosystem compare to Canada? And what about the insurance marketplace?
Yeah, this one, you know, honestly, when we moved to Hong Kong, you know, we don't operate there. So I was a bit nervous and uncertain around how we would actually fare. You know, as mentioned, we were able to hire 25 folks in AI there, and it was probably easier, quite honestly, than I expected. I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, the values-driven organization that we have. The fact that the 996 culture is not present in terms of what we offer. So the work-life balance and ability to actually focus on real-life AI problems for real-life customers, I think was very appealing to the people that we were recruiting and hiring in Hong Kong. And of course, we have, you know, 26,000 employees globally. And I think when you look at the people that we've been able to recruit and the people at the top end of the funnel, they compare very much to the people that we have in Canada and the US. So the talent at the top end is good. I think what we did find, though, in Hong Kong was, you know, perhaps the depth of talent isn't there. So in Canada, if we interview 20 people and if we hire, you know, 5 or 6, that's great. In Hong Kong, if we hired 20 people, you know, the top 2 that we'd hire is great, but would the rest actually be able to fit into our organization or not? I'm not sure, which is why I think making sure that we're developing more talent and actually supporting the ecosystem so that this continues to thrive in the medium term, I think is top of mind for Intact and for the companies that we've been collaborating with in Hong Kong as well.
What do you think the opportunities there are for other companies and for yourself?
Well, I think the opportunity for me, maybe just to build on the last answer, really is to help build that ecosystem in the medium term. You know, I think, you know, you heard earlier today in the presentations, I think the government has been very supportive of making Hong Kong, you know, a global center of fintech and innovation. You find a lot of subsidies, you find a lot of support, you find a lot of, you know, areas that are trying to focus on this. But I think we need to get the university programs aligned with what the government is also trying to do so that we can build more of the talent of tomorrow, right? And this is implementing some of the things that I think we do quite well in the West around having internships available so that companies can come to Intact, for example, or employees can come to Intact, work for a summer, and then go back out into the ecosystem and build their startup, et cetera. It's about making sure that within universities, we're not so focused on having departmental objectives and goals. And in fact, there's more collaboration within universities so that students can take courses in math, in statistics, in data and AI, so that they're more well-rounded and trained when they come and work out in the ecosystem. And that's what we've been talking to, you know, many companies and many universities in Hong Kong about how do we help support that in Hong Kong, similarly to how we do here in Canada.
Interesting. I'm really excited about what you're doing in Hong Kong and kind of the commitment that you've made to that jurisdiction, and also the fact that you're a Canadian company working internationally. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, Karim.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch over. We've got kind of just a very tight timeline, and if we can, I hope to come back and ask Karim a couple of questions at the end, but I'd like to move over to Mathias Bock. Mathias is the Chief Operating Officer of Saracen Limited, which operates. Mathias, I understand we share a couple of things in common. We're both lawyers and we both love Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong, in case you didn't know, for about 18 months when I was 18 years of age. And if it was Hong Kong today, I probably wouldn't have left. How how did you become involved with Saracen, and what was it about the technology and team that made you want to become more involved?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so as you say, I'm a lawyer by training. I started out my career in Frankfurt, went to New York, and then in 2014 came to Hong Kong. And throughout this process, I was always drawn to maybe not legal, maybe not fintech, but legal tech as a lawyer, right? Very inefficient ways of working in a law firm. And yeah, so in 2018, when I joined one of the big investment banks to advise hedge funds around the region, I started really working with startups and fintechs a lot more, and just trying to understand what kind of solutions they offer for our clients. And quickly, though, it became so much more interesting to work with these kinds of companies and these pioneers than my day-to-day, that I left the bank and yeah, just started to invest and advise startups, fintechs. And so in that process, I was introduced to our CEO at Sericin, and yeah, we really just hit it off. Similar values and then philosophies. And at the time, and still, I was really impressed with his vision for a product that sits at the center of commercial leasing. And I was really drawn in by this idea that what we're doing at Saracen is actually what law firms would do in that space if they knew how to do it. And they wanted to put the resource to that subject. Yeah, so you know, creating a document automation and decision support tool for large landlords that own office towers and malls on High Street seems like a tall order, but yeah, document automation for us is really only means to an end, right? And that is what a lot of the new technology is all about, and that's accessing that granular data, capturing all that data that you can use to unlock asset performance. But a lot of that data is really buried inside contract language. So we needed to tackle that first, and then also really go beyond what is currently being done, which is people are looking at agreements, right? We're looking at transactions. So, and then of course, you know, joining an organization, a young organization, and being able to build that up from the ground, contributing to the team, to the culture, and implementing processes, that was something that drew me in.
What challenges and opportunities do you believe Saracen experienced operating in Hong Kong versus what it may have experienced operating in Europe or New York, or sorry, North America?
Yeah, so I think there's some similarities and there are some differences. Probably one similarity is commercial leasing is quite a conservative industry, and then Hong Kong being one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world, right? The returns have simply been staggering over the last decades. And so generally there's then less urgency for people to implement change and embrace change. But we've really found that the tide is turning and there's a lot of pressure to increase performance. And of course, if things are done mainly manually, then that's really not a very promising future. So that's probably a similarity to other markets. In terms of difference, I feel that while Asia as a whole is quite fragmented, right? The markets seem to me quite concentrated. So looking at Hong Kong, there's 20 big players that own almost half of the entire commercial real estate. So you have this domino effect where you know, people are looking to the big players and sort of follow their lead. And if you can convert one of them, then you're really in for going big. And yeah, Europe, North America have always struck me as slightly more fragmented in that way. And in terms of challenges, Karim already touched on this a little bit. Hiring locally can be a challenge, right? We're a startup and we have a lot of competition, including the big banks, and digitization is so high on the agenda that a bank will come and they'll just offer salaries that we can't match. And you know, it needs a lot of convincing to tell someone, well, you know, best I can do is 70% of what HSBC is offering you. Mm-hmm. So that's a hard one. And yeah, I mean, Hong Kong is an expensive place to live, right? So people have to make ends meet, and of course everybody understands that. But there is also a certain fixation on cash and compensation. For us, really, what that means is we're just looking for people who want more than a salary, right? Entrepreneurial spirit. That kind of stuff that sort of gets beaten out of people in very large organizations is what we're looking for, and we've been doing all right, I think.
Speaking about Hong Kong and the expenses of living in such a city, what is the main source of capital for startups and scale-ups to access in Hong Kong?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's not that different from other markets. The one difference is, as I mentioned earlier, Asia is quite fragmented, right? It's a big region, and there's a number of different startup hubs around the region. So venture capital isn't quite as concentrated as maybe in North America, where there's a lot of focus on Silicon Valley. But of course, it's there and it's active. I think one of the big differences to North America is the density and then just the sheer number of family offices. If you can tap into that, that's a really good source of funding. These people are easily able to fill up rounds, come in as co-investors, things like that. And I do think that's also going to get progressively easier as the younger generations take control, and they have seen what startups can do, and they're quite excited about that kind of investment. And then, of course, last but not least, Chris Chan already mentioned the Hong Kong government is also playing its part, right? They're really supporting the ecosystem. The incubation programs at Cyberport and Hong Kong Science Park are really quite popular, and they include government grants, office space, etc. And maybe just to put a few numbers to this, just on Tuesday, the Hong Kong government announced its 2022-2023 budget. And in that budget, they earmarked about 10 billion Hong Kong dollars to support technology development. That's around 1.5 billion dollars Canadian, right? And I mean, Hong Kong is a city of 7.5 million people, and that's the budget for the coming fiscal year. So they do mean business.
Wow, that's incredible. How mature is the fintech industry in Hong Kong, consumer adoption rates and popular models and themes?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty mature. Though, of course, there's also this weird dichotomy where some aspects of the financial industry are really sort of almost in the 19th century. We're still writing checks in Hong Kong, right? At the same time, cashless payments is pretty ubiquitous. Of course, out of China, you have WeChat Pay and Alipay. That's not quite as popular in Hong Kong yet. But for example, electronic peer-to-peer payments, HSBC PayMe is very ubiquitous. You can transfer to anyone in Hong Kong with a Hong Kong telephone number, with a Hong Kong cell number, about $800 a day. So it's very easy to make these smaller kind of lunch payments, splitting bills, etc. The other testament to maturity, I'll say, is probably Hong Kong Fintech Week. It's been running for 6 years. It includes a number of programs to really connect global fintechs and Hong Kong corporates, investors, through matchmaking, pitching, competitions, and things like that. And of course, Hong Kong Fintech Week also expands into the Greater Bay Area too, which I think we're going to touch on later as well, or we already, Chris Chan also touched on. And then in terms of themes, to me, really, banking the unbanked and the underbanked is a huge opportunity in Asia. So unbanked and underbanked people are those who don't have access to traditional financial services. And really in Southeast Asia, that's about 75% of all people. And again, to put that into perspective, that's about 460 million people. And that's about the population of the US, Canada, and Mexico together. And the businesses that they run, right? So, and they need insurance, they need investments, they need credit. That's a huge opportunity, I think.
Are there other future opportunities emerging in Hong Kong? And what do you predict it'll be like in 5 years from today?
Yeah, thanks. As Christopher Hui already said, right, Hong Kong really has a roadmap that includes fintech. And they announced the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, which is Hong Kong central bank or quasi-central bank, announced its fintech vision for 2025, and that's really to push the financial sector to go digital. And of course, there's a lot of work to be done. The law has to keep up. And just when last year, I think they introduced the new Hong Kong crypto regime, I think some people were a bit surprised that it would cover professional investors, but not retail. But one of the really unique opportunities I see, and that's already also been touched on by Chris Chen, is the Greater Bay Area. I mean, with 90 million people and headquarter of some of China's most innovative companies like Huawei, Tencent, and DJI, it has a rich ecosystem of startups already, incubators, accelerators of all kinds. Business employees can get tax breaks, things like that. And for our purposes of fintech today, I mean, it's really an expansion and continuation of what is already in place. You have Hong Kong as a strong international financial center, and you have Shenzhen right north of Hong Kong as an innovation hub. And that's quite similar, a very compelling proposition, like the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley, right? Of course, that Greater Bay Area has its own challenges, right? Probably mainly language barriers, but that stuff can be overcome.
What are the next steps for Sericin in Hong Kong and beyond?
Yeah, for us, I think we're really just looking to grow our team and customer base, and we're going to have to decide where to expand to next. I think Singapore is a likely choice, but of course, China is also a huge opportunity, right? Like the market as it stands and the developments that are underway, it just really dwarfs everything else. And so, yeah, we're still evaluating our best choice there.
Given we have a broad audience here today, are there any connections, leads, or other needs Sericin's looking for at this time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're a startup, so we're always looking to connect with the right investors and the drivers of change in our industry. And people who have experienced the pains of commercial leasing. It's like preaching to the converted, right? Those are the champions that are most fun to work with, and those are the ones we're looking for.
Well, it's quite a bit of change from being a lawyer to being part of a startup. So I wish you a lot of luck there. Given that we've got, again, that time frame that I'm probably going to exceed, I'd like to get in some words from Michelle Morgan. Michelle Morgan is the CEO of Advanced Alternative Investment Systems Limited, and they do businesses tightened by AAIS. Welcome, Michelle, for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Mathias and Karim. I've actually learned a little bit already just from listening to you speak before. So just a kind of background as to who I am and where I sit in terms of my company. So I'm a chartered accountant that's been in the finance industry since 1992. And one of the jobs that I had was in Bermuda. I worked in fund administration, and I was a director there, and I became very frustrated with the technology stack that we were using, which was about this much better than useless. And instead of one piece of software that would kind of take all the data that we worked with from start to finish, we had 5 or 6 different programs, and it was very risky. And there was a lot of manual work. And I remember saying one night in complete frustration to a co-director of mine, I said, "That's it. We should just build this ourselves. This is ridiculous how much time we waste." And I think about a week later, he came to me with this kind of crazed look in his eyes, and he said, "You're right. We should do that. That's a great idea." And I said, "I had no idea what you're talking about." Of course, it was a week later, and I had gone on to new things to complain about. But he said, it's a great idea. We know there's a need for this. And really one of our bigger frustrations was anytime there was a change in the finance industry, which eventually made it to kind of investments, which made it into the funds industry. Anytime there was a change, the software couldn't keep up. So you ended up doing things manually. And Mathias was complaining about manual things earlier. Now, this manual work was around numbers. So if you can imagine doing manual things with numbers, it just doesn't make any sense. Sure. So we designed this system that could keep up with any of the changes, and it's been an incredible journey. We're now the only, we're a cloud-based system. We go up against our competitors who are 30 years old, and they were designed at a time when the cloud didn't even exist. So we can make changes much faster. So for example, we can do private equity, we can do hedge funds, and we also can keep up with crypto. So where the traditional or the would you say legacy systems were designed to say process 30,000 trades a day. With crypto, you need a lot more with the strategies that are being traded. So we can do 4.2 million trades a day. So we're way ahead of the curve for now until the next thing happens in terms of crypto. Yeah. So that's, and I would say we're still really a startup. We've been revenue producing for 5 years. We were beta for 2 years before that. We've got about 600 funds on the system, including about $2.5 billion worth of crypto. So we have a good chunk of the crypto funds market, but we still consider ourselves a startup.
Titan participated in the Accenture Accelerator program in Hong Kong. Can you tell me about the program and how you decided to participate?
That was, just an incredible experience. So yes, it's an accelerator run by Accenture. They do a few in different parts of the world. So this was the one that was held in Hong Kong. And it's a 12-week program that, the name makes sense. It's accelerator. So they help you. They organize networking, information sessions on things like legal, regulatory, the VC landscape in Hong Kong. And they set up pitches for you to do, so you have exposure to potential investors and potential customers. So it was really incredible. I mean, in no other world could I have so much packed into 3 months, including, for example, at one point they said, okay, we're setting up a pitch. We have 450 employees from Bank of America that will dial in virtually and listen in. And that was one of, say, 6 or 7 different financial institutions. So I don't know how else I could have gotten that opportunity. In terms of deciding to participate, it was more that I hoped I could participate. Excuse me. It's kind of a very competitive application program. So you fill out kind of a very involved form. You have a video introducing founders, and then they narrow it down from, I think it was about 300 companies, narrowed it down to 22, and then interviewed all those companies back to back, and then decided from there. So we were one of 11 companies that was lucky enough to get in. And it was being held virtually if we wanted. And I made the decision that I really wanted to be there in person. It took quite a bit of organizing and fingers crossed and a bit of panic with changes in rules for travel around COVID. But I'm so glad that I made it in. It was really a game changer for us.
It's really exciting.
Yeah. I was going to say that an accelerator, I mean, it's not for everyone and it does take up a lot of time. It was a game changer for me, and really more in the way that it removed me from the day-to-day. Often when you're a founder, and there's probably a few people on this call that can relate, when you're a founder, you are often wearing 6 or 7 hats. And some of that gets, very much into the detail. And so I think one of the risks is you don't take that step back and say, okay, what is best for the company now? Do we need to pivot? Because you're so busy, kind of in the trenches doing the work. So it was a really good experience for me to be away from the day-to-day in terms of being in a different time zone and being in a different location. It made me reassess and look, we had bootstrapped the company, or we still are bootstrapping the company. But having gone through this program, they also assign you a number of mentors and advisors. And after having talked to them and getting their experience with kind of a fresh pair of eyes, it made me reassess and kind of take on that we should be looking at financing. So really good experience.
You participated in person. How did you find the entrepreneurial startup and scale up ecosystem in Hong Kong?
Amazing. And I have to say, I went in probably with I think I was so busy trying to get into the country that I didn't really stop and think, okay, what are my expectations? What do I hope to get out of the program, out of the area? And yeah, no, it was amazing. I think, what Karim and Mathias had referenced and what Christopher was talking about with Invest Hong Kong, I experienced all really good things. It's really, I think one of the speakers was saying it's a community, and it really is. And I found it, very easy. When I was trying to get into Hong Kong and figuring out, okay, what are the rules? What can I do to get in? I contacted the Canadian Trade Commissioner in Hong Kong. And they helped me in that way, but they also followed up with me later and said, listen, come in, to our offices, tell us about your company, and just let us know how we can help. They then helped me set up within their pavilion. There's a Canadian pavilion at Hong Kong Fintech Week, which I think Mathias had referenced. It's an amazing, it's amazing the number of different companies and different ideas out there. So I really enjoyed being part of that Fintech Week. In InvestHK, I met through the Accelerator, but Christopher Chen also, I believe, just saw some posts on LinkedIn and contacted me on his own initiative to say, how are you doing in Hong Kong? Is there any way that I can help you? So there really is this community that goes, oh, let's help. And so it was amazing. I could not have accomplished what I did without the ecosystem being as it is.
I feel like you're a cheerleader. What are the few of the advantages and challenges you believe fintechs might experience in Asia? I know you've had a positive experience, but there must have been a few challenges.
Yeah, I think there's challenges everywhere. I think I'm a little bit more at the beginning of the process, but I could see that there would be, as Karim and Mathias alluded to, challenges with hiring. But I really, I think there's actually challenges with hiring all around the world. Right now, we're finding that in Europe and in Canada for hiring. But really, I think the solution is to, like they had alluded to, get in early, get into the universities, get to the students, get interns in, and develop a certain kind of thought process. I think especially when you're talking about the innovative tech startups, it is a totally different mindset. As Secretary Hui said, like you have to have a kind of an adventurous mindset to start things up that are new. So I think just really cultivating those kind of that kind of next generation. But I think there are also a lot of advantages to being a Canadian fintech. I think just being fintech right now and all the things that have already been covered in terms of opening up in Hong Kong or in Asia. There can be language challenges, but depending on what kind of company you are, that might be an advantage. And so a quick example of that is I was talking to an investment manager run out of a bank, and a lot of their clients were in China and wanted statements in, I believe it's simplified Chinese. And we were actually able to do that within our program, whereas none of the other programs that they looked at were able to do that. So after going there and talking to them and then going back to the programmers, I was able to say, here's an example of what a shareholder statement would look like. So there can be disadvantages, but if you can turn them into advantages, then that's great.
Any advice to Canadian fintech companies considering expanding into Hong Kong or Asia?
I think, do your research. And I would say personally, my experience with actually being there on the ground and seeing firsthand and meeting people was so advantageous in terms of getting really a good feel for, is this a place that will suit you? Is this a place where you think you can start up your company and expand your company? You get a pretty good feeling. Not in 1 week, but I was there for 3 months, and the number of meetings that I had, and then they were all very easy to get meetings. The number of meetings I had there just really gave me a good feel that it is a good place for us to expand. And I think, as some of the other panelists were saying, like there is money there. There's a lot of money there for investment, and there's also kind of an openness in terms of partnering. So if you've got a company and you need to partner with someone either on the technology side or even just on the sales side, there is that available and an open mind towards it.
What are the next steps for Titan in North America and Hong Kong?
So we made a lot of really good contacts there, so a lot of potential clients. One of these potential clients I actually met when I wasn't really expecting it during Hong Kong Fintech Week, sitting at the pavilion. And so they are a potential user of my Titan platform. But as well, I was talking to them and I said, oh, I can't make the meeting, whatever tomorrow because I'm busy pitching to some investors. I hadn't even thought to mention that before, but they said, oh, investors, how much are you raising? I said, well, it's our first round. Here's how much we're looking at. Yeah, we could do that. So that's one of our potential next steps is both a potential client and investor and a strategic investor at that. So that was happened to be sitting in the right place at the right time during Hong Kong FinTech Week.
Just showing up is usually about 90% of the issue.
It is amazing. It makes me not want to not show up to anything, which is making me a bit tired, but there's definitely an advantage to getting out there as much as you can.
I heard the bell go, so we don't have much time, but I want to give you the opportunity that I gave Mathias. Given that we have a broad audience again here with us today, are there any connections, leads, or other needs that you're looking for at this time?
Anyone that really is in the fund administration world, so either fund administrators or investment managers that are big enough to be doing their own fund admin. If you need a system that is modern, that can do private equity, hedge funds, and crypto, then please reach out. Or if you are an investor that's looking at investing in a company that already has a very broad market and a proven product, then reach out.
Perfect. Craig, do we have enough time to basically ask one last question, just final comments from our speakers, or do I need to just wind it up?
Well, is it a good question?
I just want to ask whether
you have like
one last comment before we move on.
Sure, let's get a little interaction. Sure, quick one.
Quick one. Okay, Karim, I guess we haven't heard from you in the last 40 minutes. Any last comments that you'd like to add?
No, I think, Hong Kong is a very vibrant place. And I think, Michelle and Mathias, touched on that as well. I do, stress the fact that the openness of the business community, the willingness to actually help and assist. As a Canadian going there and living there for 18 months, it's a remarkable opportunity, remarkable experience. And I think the opening to Asia and China in particular that you can actually get into Hong Kong is fantastic. Get in touch with InvestHK, get in touch with the Consulate General. There's going to be a lot of people that are willing to help you as well. And if there's anything that we can do to assist in terms of knowledge or connections, feel free to contact me directly.
Great. Very generous of you, Karim. Mathias, any last comments you'd like to give to the audience here today?
Yeah, sure. I'll second that general openness of people to connect. I'll make the caveat that Asia is different from North America in the sense there's a lot of relationship building involved, right? So getting meetings is actually quite easy. You can easily come to Hong Kong and do 2 weeks of a roadshow and have a packed schedule. Now converting that into business, that's a different story. And people are slow to warm up sometimes. And one of the things that can really help is to find somebody local who has that network, who is trusted by his peers, her peers in the market, and can really take you forward. And just like Karim said, if there's anything that we can help with, any more questions, please reach out anytime.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mathias. Michelle, any last comments to the audience or advice?
Nothing really different from what was very well communicated by Karim and Mathias already. If it's something that you think might be a good fit, definitely, start doing your research. And there are just a ton of resources that can help you. And try to get there in person. I know that's hard these days, but I think to really understand, because as we say, it's a different culture. It's hard to describe, but just to make sure that if it's a good fit for you, you kind of have to get there in person, I would say.
Relationships are everything in Asia. I would agree. Thanks a lot to our panel. I've definitely learned a lot from all three of you, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken today to come out and speak to the audience. Thank you.